Okay, so we have the great pleasure of having ColdSmoke today to tell us about, well, the title is what exactly?
About generating roads and rails. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you can begin. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. So, um, today I'm going to talk about this implementation that I made of Bezier curves after being inspired from watching a YouTube video, and then how I apply the math of a Bezier curve to generate 3D models in the world like roads and rails, and kind of walk through my process for doing that. Um, so I have uh, actually a template that I made, like a freebie place that is the starting place that I'm looking at, that anybody can get. I put the link in the code channel, but I don't know, maybe it can end up in the description of the recorded video later. Um, but so basically, what I have here is I have kind of a Bezier Path class that I built, um, which has a couple of values in here. But basically, a Bezier curve is just, like it's like you have a couple of points and you have tweening going on between each of the different layers of points. And when you have this iterative stacking of the tweening between the points, it gives you a very nice, smooth looking curve. Um, uh, and so with relative ease, I mean, I was surprised. I always thought the curves would be difficult, but once I realized that you can make Bezier curves work with a couple of like built-in Roblox functions, I was shocked at how quickly I was able to get curves just working in Roblox. So what I've got here, uh, I got
So
the
what are
Bezier.
the instances that you're using to fill that curve? Like what are we seeing there?
Okay, so that is some code from Ego Moose, which I've slightly modified. This is that code. So he's got a function here that can take 3 points, um, and generate a triangle. Because the wedges in Roblox by default are stuck as right angle. There's a word for these kind of triangles. Uh, yeah, a right triangle. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Uh, so he's got this function that basically uses two right triangles to connect any 3 points without having to have a right angle in it. And so basically, in my main function, I generate a Bezier curve. I have this little function up here that offsets the coordinates returned by the curve to the right or to the left. And then I'm using this draw triangle function basically just to connect the dots, which is fairly simple, uh, you know, because I'm just using the same set and offsetting it. It's a very structured set of data. So again, I'll show what that actually looks like in the real world. You can kind of see artifacts of the triangles being made here. Or we can go here and um, okay, I think I have set this up so that if I remove the color from the function, it automatically fills it in with a random color. So very fun. Oh, no, I lied.
So
Let's
the
see.
the
Oh,
points for these triangles, they just This is part of the Bezier curve library. You just return some number of, you're just picking some fixed number of points along the curve and then passing that into this triangle constructor.
Yes. So I actually, when I was last working on this, I wrote a function that basically I check several points along the curve, but I have it set to optimize essentially so that areas of the curve where not very much is happening, it gives you points a lot more like sparsely.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask. It would seem like if you had a sharp corner, you'd get very big chunks, and this would look unattractive. But I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have it. I scan. Boy, I had coded that part a little bit a while ago. Okay, get C-frame path. So this is my function that basically, so you have a resolution or 100. So you can set the parameter, but basically it'll divide any one segment of the Bezier curve into 100 pieces, and then it goes through each of those, and it has multiple different sensitivities. So it's a lot more sensitive to vertical changes because making roads, I want vehicles to work very smoothly on this. If it's just a horizontal turn, a car in Roblox doesn't really care if the edges are jagged versus, if you start going on an incline, the physics would prefer a smoother curve. Uh, so that's what this function here does. I'll name my variables very verbosely, but I still need to get better at commenting my code.
What is HMag and VMag? Because I'm curious why you're doing it. What were you doing with degrees?
And it's a little bit of a strange thing. So I believe H mag and V mag. The mag stands for magnitude. H is horizontal. V is vertical. And so my math here, I have last direction and this direction. So what I'm doing here is kind of cheaty, I would call it, simply because I use something that worked, but I don't think it's a very concise mathematical solution to what I needed here. But so basically, I'm tracking the look vector of the C frame, and I'm using the delta, like the magnitude change between the look vector. So if the C frame is rotating, the look vector will become offset in space, and so I'm tracking the rotation in a very weird way, I guess.
Okay.
And that's what those are. Yeah, because I'm making a vector from the look vectors, but I'm getting rid of one of the axes. Well, I'm getting rid of the y because I'm using the y down here on its own, so that there's more sensitivity to vertical changes.
Oh, right. And then what do you use these for?
So I put these into this current delta variable, and this is kind of where I do the math that weights things. So the vertical magnitude is multiplied by a ratio of the horizontal tolerance and the vertical tolerance that you can either set those parameters when you call this function, or I believe I have defaults in here. Maybe I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically, whatever the ratio between vertical and horizontal tolerance, it increases the vertical tolerance, or technically you could decrease it too if the ratio just depending on the ratio. And then it adds them together basically to have like every single step of the way it's keeping track. So it's like if the delta, if it's changed, if the rotation overall has changed like 5 degrees, and then this time it changes 2 more degrees, then it meets these conditions right here, and it resets a current delta to 0, and it inserts a frame at this position. So basically, it's just a way that you like tip the counter, and then it counts that position, and then it resets to track when to take the next one, basically.
That's really interesting. It's like you're kind of doing, I don't know, numerical integration or something. I'm not sure.
I don't even know what numerical integration
Yeah,
means.
forget.
But
I'll have to think about that.
but yeah, I think of this as like a dumb smart solution. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there's a better way to solve for this, but I'm kind of brute forcing it in a way because I just wanted it to work. So there you go. So that this basically just outputs a set of C frames, which you can manipulate in various ways, like this function I was pointing out earlier, where basically you give this set of C frames and a distance, and it just goes through each of them and returns you a new set that's all offset to the right or the left. It probably would have been a good idea to generalize this more so that you could pick whether you're doing the right vector or the up vector. So you could also shift things down relative to the curve. But for the most part, the most relevant piece to this is shifting right or left if you're trying to generate roads.
Could you try and break your code by making those corners really sharp or something, just so we can see this
sure.
resolution?
Let's see here. Uh-oh. Okay. So I gave these all little pointy arrows. This over here, just building in general. So this over here is a plugin. It's called Studio Build Suite. I've been using it since like 2012 to build. It's made by Fractility, I believe, and I think that this is based on an earlier plugin called Command Utility, which goes way back in Roblox history. This used to be like the only way you could possibly build because Roblox Studio tools were very difficult to use back in the day. So
what exactly does that plugin do?
this plugin is basically just it gives you tools for like you can move things. So like move axis is just world axis. Move object moves things relative to the object's position, or you can rotate things, rotate group, rotate object. These all just have different implications for, like, if you have multiple things selected and you rotate pivot, you're rotating around this object. But if you rotate object, it rotates them all individually, or group rotates them as a group. So
are you using like keyboard shortcuts to do that, or can we just not see the mouse or something?
Oh, I am assuming you probably can't see the mouse then. That's odd. Let's see if I can switching my screen. Can you see my mouse now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay. But you can see like the handles and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember. I think we could see your mouse when we were looking at the code. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
Yeah, I think it went away somewhere in the last few minutes.
Weird.
This
Okay, well,
plugin seems useful. Someone should do like an oral history of Roblox plugins back to the beginning of time sometime.
yeah,
That'd be interesting.
maybe I could do that. Yeah, I've made a couple of plugins. I have some very old plugins that I've made that, like, I have some old tree generators that I think now are just horrendous. The part count on them.
I'm
But
quite serious. So my wife is a historian, and she did her PhD on oral history of some handcraft in rural China. Like, I guess to an individual immersed in using a particular tool, it seems like hardly how could this possibly be interesting to outsiders. But this is an important part of history, I think, how people
yeah,
work on
I mean,
these things.
I think that could be a super cool tool, actually, or a cool talk. I could definitely contribute to that a little bit.
It's too late.
I
You're on
actually,
you're on the hook for that now.
I actually have an old YouTube video that I made in 2009 because Roblox had a release a tutorial contest. So I was like, oh, I want to win this Roblox contest. So I made this tutorial on how to delete the base plate, and it shows you how archaic Roblox Studio was way back. It was like Comic Sans. There's like a tiny rectangle in the corner. Like none of this UI existed. It was crazy.
Maybe
Anyway,
they
so
should bring back the Comic Sans.
maybe they should. I don't know. They've done pretty well since they phased out Comic Sans. So
Yeah.
so I've set these two nodes up. This should be a much sharper pinch. So I guess let's see how these turn out. Surprisingly good. I mean, it's a very ugly corner right there, but what can you do? I want to see if I can how big of a curve it will. If I tuck this underneath. Okay, that's kind of pushing the limits, I suppose. It's a good idea. So put that back there. Run it again. Wow, it still works. Amazing. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that you can play with once you kind of have a baseline down. So like I've modified this code already. I kind of hid the modification I made to it, but I made this road thickness variable which offsets these triangles down so that it even having thickness, it'll keep the same surface plane as it originally did. Let's see if that still works. It's not so good. I guess it could use some tweaking. This side looks kind of nice. Worth going up, except there's some artifacts for sure. But so now I have a thick road, which contextually makes more sense to players, I'm sure. But then you can do other things like when I was pandering to the train community. So let's see here. What do I want to do? I'm going to basically make two sets of these. I'm going to make an A set and a B set. I don't believe this is how I did it at all last time. But basically the second set of each of these is going to be one stud further out. And then I'm going to modify this down here. So the second set, A, So the first two will draw from the A sets. The second two will draw from. Wait a second. This isn't going to work. What am I doing here? No, this will work. Hmm. No. Yes. Maybe. So before I was crisscrossing from the right side to the left side to the right side, but now I need to, when I'm drawing these triangles, keep everything in the right side, but just alternate between A and B. So it's kind of the right side of the right side and the left side of the right side would be a better way to think about that. Left side A, left side A. Let's see what happens. Boom. So now along this Bezier pathway, we have equidistant, what do you call these? Rail, are they just rails, the metallic parts of a
Yeah, that's right.
track? So because of the math here, these should be perfectly equidistant the whole way. I'm not much of a train guy, but certainly that's the only variable important to whether or not a train could functionally ride on these tracks. Maybe need a little bit less of an incline.
I actually heard that train tracks are like designed based around ellipses. And I wonder how you like string those together smoothly to make tracks.
Yeah, I don't know. So ellipses in what way? I'm not much of a train guy, to be honest with you.
Oh, me neither. I think I was just watching on Twitter. Somebody like it was discussion between Bezier curves and ellipses for train tracks. That's all I recall.
Interesting. So, hmm. I'd be curious to learn more about that. So I kind of have a little bit of a hack that I wanted to try, and I think now might be a good time to do that. Maybe. Basically, I've been thinking with this code. As I'm generating the Bezier curve, I use, if I can find it, I'm returning cframe.lookat, and that's kind of how I am getting the C-frames to like to make sense in the context of a road, because when I was initially trying this and just lerping C-frames exclusively and using the output from that, there's a lot of funny stuff happening to the rotation of the C-frames that didn't really make sense. So by using cframe.lookat, which basically takes two positions and it outputs a C-frame that is located at the first position and looking at the next position. But it has a third parameter, which is an up parameter. And so by default in Roblox, up is just always up. But essentially, the idea that I had was if I could insert a point to treat as like the center of the universe, so that any point of the Bezier curve, the C frame would return kind of with different tilted angles, so that you could create like banking in the road. Yeah, because with this, you know, when this generates, the surface kind of always comes out upright, no matter what, because of that look at function. And so, I think an easy way to do this will be to, in the get C-frame path, I'm going to add a final parameter at the end. I'll just call it look at. And then, oh, that's not the right function to be doing that in. Get C-frame at distance. That doesn't seem right. Get vector. This is right. Get vector alpha, look at, get vector alpha, look at. And there we go. So self get vector, anywhere that I have get vector, I'll put this. This is not a very good way to structure code generally. Just inserting extra parameters into all of your functions. But it'll be a fun hack for now. So I'm going to take one of these. I'm going to rename this to bank. Color it red so I can keep track of it. I'll move axis. Let's see. All right, let's try that. So then here, when I get the C-frame path, and that is the function I'm looking for, get C-frame path, I'll put in my last name at the end, and I'll call this game.workspace.bank. And then, I don't know. I don't think that's going to work. I think I need to localize this C-frame. Oh, we got an error. Vector 3 expected got nil. Huh. Oh, of course. It would probably help. Oh, wait. That's not what that's called. All right, position. Class on debugging. Of course, just as we expected. Look at was nil. What is it here?
What do you call get C-frame path?
I call it over here in the main script.
Oh, okay.
I just call it
work.
once. But so it looks like the issue here actually is that because I just threw in look at here, look at, there's other places where get vector could have been called where I didn't include that. So I kind of need to give it like a something to default to. All right, so it kind of worked this time. Not exactly how I was expecting it, but that is certainly a different result. But as I kind of suspected, I need this to kind of localize the direction that it's looking for each of these. So um, I'm going to say local look at equals p0 dot position minus like that. Well, I'll add in a ternary operator. And then I'll just plug in local look at here. It's weird scripting when people are watching. Oh boy.
Don't worry, I
right.
deliberately made a meal out of many of my live coding sessions so that everybody after me looks really smart. So don't worry.
I can't tell if this is
That looks
kind of
cool
working or-
anyway.
Yeah.
You got to publish this, and then we'll get in there with the cars and see if any of us can make
Yeah.
it work.
Yeah, anybody have working trains? Let's put the pedals to the metal.
This is kind of fun. I had to solve like similar problems. I had a demo for skiing, and like I generated ski paths using curves. So this is like fun to see how you solve it.
Yeah, I just noticed earlier that you released a whole library for generating splines.
Oh
And I
yeah,
was
that
like,
came from my skiing game.
oh, well, there you go. Yeah, I was looking at that and I was like, well, Ethan's the pro at splines.
But he didn't make train tracks.
I'm a noob. You did not make train tracks. Yeah, people love their train tracks. I found out.
Yeah, I actually want to query the way you said that earlier. The what did you say? Pandering to the train track people,
Pandering to the train community.
Yeah, what's behind that? Is there like a secret cabal of train experiences in Roblox?
Yeah.
And
Well, when I first made here, actually, I'm going to pull up my more impressive use of my curves. Also, I'm used to using a 2K monitor, but I'm using my small monitor for this so that people can appreciate the resolution better. So in this demo where I generated roads, a lot more impressive. And with this one, I actually use beams to make the lines in the roads.
Can you set your what happens if you set your resolution to 1, your graphics?
Oh, that's a good. Oh, well, I planned for that. How do you do that in Studio?
I think you have to play the game like as a player, yeah.
Does this work? Where's Roblox? How does Roblox work? Okay. I'm excited. I'm gonna flex so hard when this works flawlessly. Let's see here. Manual, all the
There
way
you go.
down. Boom. It looks flawless.
Oh, so you're using 1 beam per straight line?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
so what was the little adversarial moment there? What was Ethan hoping to catch you out on?
So basically, beams, people have been a little bit disappointed with beams because basically, if you make like a smooth curve, some people have tried to use beams to like make a circle, right? Like you could have a circle that sits underneath the player, and it's like, oh, sweet, I made this. It's like 2D and it's really lightweight, and you don't have to use like a mesh or something to have the circle. But as the graphics goes down, Roblox actually simplifies the amount of segments in a beam's curve. So the intuitive thing to expect in a place like this with all these smooth curves is as you lower the graphics, Roblox would simplify these curves to the point where they're just like jagged and don't make sense, or like I think even at graphics 1, curves just become completely straight lines from one end to the other. So yeah, the expectation was that the curves would just all be ruined essentially.
Is there any community updated information somewhere about what happens at the various graphics quality settings? I presume Roblox wouldn't provide such a thing, but it's kind of useful to know these details.
That is a great idea. I don't know of anything like that. With that said, I think that there's a lot of knowledge about Roblox that is just like not written down. And it's kind of always something that's bothered me because every once in a while you pick up on bits of information like that from other developers where it's like, wait a second, why did nobody tell me this before?
Yeah, absolutely. Billy and
It
I
just had
probably
to
say that
surprise me.
once a week.
I have a little fun fact about beam rendering actually, because I've investigated this a little bit. So there are beams have 10 levels of like quality, like levels of detail, and you can render exactly 1066.6 beams, and they will actually render 0.6 of a beam.
Really?
Yeah, I
What
have a
is-
screenshot somewhere.
What does that even mean? It just stops 66%
Yeah, it doesn't.
of the way.
That's exactly right.
How would that even happen? Okay. Wow.
Wow.
All right. The computer will blow up if you finish that
That
beam.
just stopped right in the middle. Here's the most recent version of this where I was. Wait a second. Did I just lie? Oh no, I'm not looking at the right place. Wait, I just opened place, didn't I? It might be crashing. Oh, it's crashing. Good. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the most recent version of this where I was experimenting with stuff. So here you can see I was using attachments to kind of analyze what's going on here. Because in this version, I actually alternate between using the triangles and actually just using rectangular parts in order to reduce the part count. Because basically, I mean, in most cases, like if you just have a flat road and then it's just rotating, um, besides being like really picky about z-axis clipping, there's not really any reason to like use extra triangles or extra parts as wedges to like make this like perfect. Like, so having the rectangles, you have some overlap, but you reduce the complexity of everything a lot, which theoretically should make these roads run better on lower end devices. I assume. I don't know. Roblox has a lot of optimization stuff that they like to say, don't worry about it. That's our problem, not yours. So yeah, this is the latest and greatest. Kind of.
Can I just ask how to look at the code? Because the link you shared, I think it's private.
So it's hard for me to tell because I am myself, so of course I have full access. But presumably you should be able to click the dots in the top right and hit edit.
All right. I think there's a link you shared on Twitter that isn't private, but I think the one you shared in Discord is private. I forget.
Yeah,
Was
the
able
one
to
that I
find it.
put on Twitter I figured out a while ago. I think I need to make it public. Roblox keeps changing where this option is though. And I feel like it becomes harder and harder to make things. Oh, there you go. Okay, now try it out. See if you.
All right. Thanks.
No problem.
Can I just ask about the like I'm just sort of going back to the start with this.
Yeah.
You're defining these roads by you have a sequence of points that defines a Bezier path, and if I understand right, the function that actually like calculates the C frames like in between the points that define the path is the get C frame path function.
So the get C-frame path is more, that's kind of a higher level function that uses the data from the Bezier curve to like output usable C-frames to like generate roads. But really the math is coming from the get vector function, where n alpha represents so with Roblox's C-frames, the lerp function, they call alpha the parameter that you pass that's like any number between 0 and 1 that gets you the point along that lerp.
Yeah, I understand.
So my n alpha is that, but in the iterative, it applies that alpha to all the lerps, and then to the lerps of the lerps, and then to the lerps of the lerps of the lerps. Because since this is quadratic or cubic, this is cubic, so I have 4 iterations of lerps. Although you can actually change that if you just change this number, it works with any level of iterations. But cubic kind of seems to be the level of iterations that most people use. And so in here, I also actually have a point. Let's see here. I think it's my update points function. So I forgot about this. Update points. When you give the Bezier path a set of points, if you just pass the table of points, it automatically calls update points on those points. But if you want to change them later, you would have to call update points with the new set of points. I'm using the word points a lot. And so this runs through those points and kind of, I don't remember exactly what it does, but it's the equivalent of like Blender, like baking shadows onto a mesh or something. So this is calculating things kind of in a one-off way so that they can be used later. Oh,
Okay.
part of this update points, it creates a lookup table. So actually, I added functionality to my Bezier Path class so that you can get the C frame at a given distance down the Bezier path, which is not something that there's not like normal math to do that, as far as I could tell. Like the only good way to achieve like what's the C frame like 10 studs down the Bezier curve is by scanning through the whole Bezier curve and literally mapping out the distances into some sort of function, where then you can like reverse engineer the position out from the distance, if that makes sense. So that's
I
what the
think
update point.
I think Ethan did something like this, like uniformly defining the path along.
I actually
As a
removed
distance.
that.
Oh, you removed it.
Yeah, I removed it because it was too slow.
Oh, really?
I need to find a faster way to do it. But yeah, you're right. Like this is a hard. There is no solution, like closed form solution for this. It's you kind of just have to numerically calculate it.
Yeah, that's when I was looking into it, I was like, really? I have to like do a whole thing that just like kind of guesses, like gross. But luckily this that I put together just it ended up working. So this is actually I use this function. So you can actually just summon this by calling get C frame at distance. And so I use this to make the road lines evenly spaced. And also like in that free train track place that I handed out before, I spaced the railroad ties just very poorly. They're not evenly spaced. They just kind of look even, but With those ones, I'm literally just using the alpha, and I'm like, at 0.1 alpha, I put a tie. At 0.2 alpha, put a tie. But depending on how extreme the curve is, that those could look completely out of whack. But since adding this function, you could add like very pretty precisely spaced. I want a railroad tie every 6 studs, and do that this way, essentially. And so I think by doing that too, I also have this length property of the class. So once you create a Bezier path, you can do like print. In this instance up here, I could do print this curve dot length, and right at the start, it'll tell me, boy, one of these.
One of
Probably,
those numbers.
yeah. I imagine it's this one, the 87.27 studs.
So this is a cool opportunity to insert some math, if you don't mind. So this problem of computing arc length along a Bezier curve, this is the origin of what are called elliptic integrals, which are a large, a very an important part of both algebraic geometry and other areas of mathematics to study exactly this question. So this is a cool problem to have arrived at through Roblox.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
I found
that's really cool.
I found a survey paper on it. I'll post it into the Discord. But yeah, this is it's cool that we ended up discussing this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So you still can't compute the value of whatever integrals you talk about there. But I don't know if using any of that elliptic integral math, like what's the interesting things that you can say about such integrals? Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, now I feel much more impressed with myself that I got something that slightly worked. Works good enough.
I'm surprised before you were saying that like you tried doing a C-frame lerp between instead of the vector lerping, and I'm surprised that didn't work because that seems like a sort of more natural solution than solving for the position and then engineering what direction it should be looking.
Well, so I think that the reason that it didn't work is because the rotation of the C frame, something about it ended up feeling very disconnected from what you would expect from the positions of the C frame. Those two aren't inherently linked. So while it's moving the position of the C frame, there's nothing about that lerp necessarily that is like this C frame will always be looking forward. It's like it's just tweening the rotation towards the final step without really consideration for its space three-dimensionally, if that makes sense. I wonder
As
if
in the rotation is just going sort of straight towards the the orientation is just going to immediately towards the orientation of the next point.
Yes. Yeah. So
But isn't that the point of lerping between doing that multi-level lerping, that it sort of smoothly transitions rather than sort of going straight from one point to the other?
kind of. I don't. Let me. I'm trying to find the copy of. I save every single step of what I do. Oh, look at this! Back when I was making it smooth for Twitter. I think that the problem might be able to be found somewhere here. This is a much simpler version of my Bezier's Bezier. Who knows how to pronounce it correctly? Not me. I don't know a quick way to break my code to show you kind of the behaviors that I was running into. But I don't know. It would just end up very strange. Like if you had a U-turn, for instance, like the positionally the parts would come out making the U-turn, but the parts would just kind of be rotating on their own to still meet up with the correct final C-frame, but again, like the directionality was not preserved. So I
Right,
guess,
like they rotate too quickly or something.
yeah, like in the dead center of the curve, for instance, like the part would be like rotated like 45 degrees off because it's just like kind of taking its own pathway, I guess. I don't know. It's hard for me to describe, I guess.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, let's see.
Because it made me like
Oh.
I was surprised to think about like making a Bezier path out of C frames, because like usually you just make a Bezier path out of like points in 2D or 3D space, and I wonder if you can consider like Bezier paths in like any vector space.
I think you could. I mean, I wonder if I've just been overlooking. Oh, of course. Okay, so fun fact, fun learning lesson right here. Vector 3 also has a lerp function. So if I had known that earlier, I probably would have made my whole Bezier thing in vector 3s once I found out that C-frames were not really preserving the rotation correctly.
Wait, what's max and min? Have you ever seen that?
I have not ever seen that. This might be new. I noticed the other day that they added new functions to tables, which I find extremely exciting. Personally, I was looking at the table reference page and I was like, "What? What are all these?" Came out of nowhere. Yeah, I've never seen vector max or vector
Yeah,
min.
me neither.
Each component is the highest.
This looks like some of the clamping stuff you were doing, Ethan.
Oh, what was I doing?
Component is the highest.
Weren't you doing some sort of clamping when you were talking about this VR character math? Maybe I'm incorrect. I thought you were doing something more or less like this. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't you. I've forgotten.
Oh, this is super interesting, actually. Wow, actually, you know what? I can think of practical uses for this where I've had to like code the manual version of this in the past. Because basically here, if you take a vector 3 and you call max and then you just put in like a point of vector 3s, you could use this to like calculate, what is the furthest corner, the furthest corners of the workspace that encompass all of the points that you feed into this.
Like the bounding box.
Oh,
yes.
right.
Yeah, that's where it came up the other week in the talk that was about physics, implementing physics.
Oh, Matthias.
Matthias, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he had exactly this somewhere in there. But I don't know if he was using this inbuilt thing or whether it was manually implemented.
Yeah, then table added table.find that never used to exist.
New table just dropped.
Oh, something. I must have missed these additions.
Yeah, you can freeze tables now. I can't really think necessarily of what I would freeze tables for.
Immutable data. That's
immutable. But can't you just avoid muting your own data?
Sometimes you have to slap on the wrist.
All right, it's good. It's the end of the session. We can start the flame war about imperative versus functional programming. Let's go.
Table.move. This
you
is
mean the
huge.
move? Yeah, clone's coming too.
Really? Oh my
Yeah, because
goodness.
people were using table.move as a way of cloning. So they figured, well, we'll just add a clone natively.
Yeah, I mean that was like such a hard thing for me to get over like a long time ago when I first started using tables. I can't just like set a second table to equal the first table and it's like a new copy. Like they're both referencing the same table, and if I modify one, it modifies the other. I was like, what? Then you have to make a whole function that clones it without one modifying the other. Kind of
Can you
unintuitive.
explain what's actually happening here? Move index 2 through 4 in source to index 1. What does it mean to move it through 4?
So basically, this means it takes the first table and it takes so for instance 2 through 4. So it's taking B, C, and D,
Oh,
and then it's moving
right.
it to position 1 of this table. So it's inserting it right at the front.
Right, I misunderstood the meaning of through.
When I first read
Yeah.
this, I spent like 15 minutes looking at it. Like, what is it? Oh, A2, A1, T, F, E. It feels like there's
dots
a
are
better way
awful.
to explain this.
Yeah. The name's not great too because it would imply that like you're also removing them from the first table, but you're not. You're just cloning them to the second table.
Yeah, that's at first I thought it was that where it just moves it entirely, and I was like very excited for that. But
Is there one? I've seen. I've been playing around with React, and because there's this need for immutable data. There is a lot of like. There's this llama library function called merge, where you can take a. I think you can like take a table and return a new one where you've only changed like certain keys, certain key value pairs. I wonder if they'll add anything like that because I'm unsure whether or not to like include the llama library just for that function, or if I should just define it myself.
I think merge works on dictionaries too, whereas this is only arrays.
Right. Okay.
I'm curious to find out. I saw table.clear, and I wonder if you set the like metatable index of a table, does table.clear just reset like the top layer of the table? I'm not good with technical terms, but so if you use the index of the metatable of the table to set like default values for a class, and then you call table.clear on it, do you think that that would reset the variables on the top basically to the default values of the table? Or I wonder if it does that, or if it just clears. I wonder if it
Probably
maintains
not.
the metatable-ness underneath.
I mean, you could just try it.
I know. I should try it. Oh, and table.create is amazing because you can create multi-dimensional arrays extremely quickly. So if you do table.create and then count for like the x value, and then inside the value you put another table.create, you can get a grid, like an XY coordinate array, or you can keep doing it and get an XYZ or whatever.
Wait, are you sure? I feel like I've done that before, and I think that's a trap.
No, I'm sure. Well, I don't know. Let's see. Let's find out right now. So
But by the way, if you clear a table, its metatable does not get removed.
interesting.
Oh, okay. I see your example there. Yeah, so what you're doing, or yeah, the one towards the bottom, yeah, you're reusing the same table in all three indices.
Yeah, but you can basically. So here's the thing. I love. Let's go back in my catalog of saves. to my Turing Generation system. So I always manually code functions that, let's see here, biomes, world builder. God, this small screen is so hard to understand what's going on. I am certain empty mask. Okay, so here I have a function that size in voxels x, do blank table, size blank table, c,
Yeah.
default value. So I could replace all of this literally with that one thing that we're looking at here.
Well, what I'm saying is you can't, because I've tried it. So like if you're reusing the same table in all 3 indices. So if you edit one index, you're gonna edit all 3.
Well, could you pass a function as the?
I don't think so.
How can I want to break this? I want this to work.
Can you run that file, by the way?
Yeah, sure. You want to see it? Oh, this might be a localized one. I think I would have to have a character. All right. The output is calculating things. Boom. And this is procedural too, so it just goes on forever. It uses chunks to just.
They made Minecraft in Roblox.
Yeah, and I have different biomes, and I use a Verneuil algorithm basically to like give these biomes shapes, but then I like I tween the height maps of each of the biomes so that they're mostly pretty smooth in between them. There's still some artifacts, like you can see a very distinct line here where this finally sinks beneath this biome.
Oh. How are you merging the colors? Like,
So
there's a gradient there, yeah.
yeah, so for that, I'm actually using one of my favorite functions, math.noise, but I'm basically I'm taking like, so there's a line somewhere in the middle here as defined by my Verneuil algorithm, and depending on how far away one of these dots is from that line, it's biased towards this color or towards this color. But then on top of that, I apply math.noise to bias it even more. And then basically, like, if it's more than 0, it's going to be the biome on this side. And if it's less than 0, it's going to be the biome on this side. And so by doing that, I'm able to create these like splotchy biome transitions that are very aesthetically pleasing. I'll show you the code for that if you want.
It's cool. Like, I've messed with Turing Generation, but only like to the extent of just using Pro and noise. I've never like tried to build on top of it biomes like this. This is very cool.
Yeah, this is one of like the reoccurring topics of my life.
I think this is on my like game developer rites of passage list is Turing Generation.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's funny thinking back, like I don't even know how long ago my first attempt was when I was just using like math.random and making like 2D terrain. And I was like, now let's make it 3D. And I realized it was a lot more complicated than that.
By the way, Ethan, you have to revisit that list. That was not even talked about in that talk, but the later items in that list were pretty entertaining.
I'm so glad somebody saw that.
So yeah, I hope we don't have to personally live through all the items in that list, but there's a great story there apparently.
Yeah. I'll find a screenshot.
This is my gigantic folder of Roblox saves. So this folder alone goes back to 2016, but then
Space RTS. Okay.
I can go archive, old. I think there's another old. These files are from 2014.
Oh, it's amazing.
I thought I was bad.
Yeah, this is the stuff that used to be considered old.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah, I'll just keep going forever.
Okay.
Old.
No,
You have a backup of
this session is now turning into an ad for your history talk.
Yeah. Terrain importer. In 2014, I wrote a bitmap terrain importer that can take a
Cool.
bitmap image and first of its kind.
You know, there's
Was
a
just fun.
tool now that will like it's like similar to Rojo, but you can back up your entire RBXL file to GitHub. So you can version control an RBXL, which you might benefit from.
Probably. I need to learn how to use GitHub. I'm there's a lot of stuff like what you just described where every time I see it, I'm like, I should finally figure out what that is. Yeah, I'm weirdly like a noob for how experienced I also am.
Everybody's a noob in some axes. Can I ask about that terrain? So there's lots of parts there, all with collide turned on, or can collide turned on.
Yes.
How do you prevent? I mean, I've tried something similar on a much smaller scale to graph some data for an event once, and I was worried if I did it at this scale that everything would just slow to a crawl because of the collision calculations and stuff. But do you do anything special to account for that, or just Roblox is smart enough to not be making?
Well, so Roblox has improved significantly. I remember there's definitely a point in time where this was not possible at all. But I mean, the thing is I actually have chunk loading. So like on the horizon, it's loading in parts, and behind me, it's removing parts, which kind of helps. But the other thing is when generating all this, and this might be what you're getting at, there is a trick actually, which is every time that you change the property of a part while it's in the workplace or workspace, it causes it to recalculate all of the physics and collisions and all that stuff. It's very laggy. But if you instance a part into the world and then you set all of its settings like anchored and its C frame and all that stuff, and then you just kind of like if you put like 1,000 parts into a model and then move the model into the workspace after everything's set, it doesn't have to update all those collisions. It just kind of does it once, and there's a dramatic performance increase from setting properties
That's very
prior to
interesting.
moving it.
So, like for each, say, Y slice made up of many of these columns, you're putting them in a model and then parenting them to the workspace or something
Exactly. Yeah. I'm doing that, but for like a whole chunk at a time.
like that.
So
Oh, that's interesting.
I generate this cube.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
All
worth
into the
knowing.
model, and then I just move the model in, and it just runs super fast.
Yeah, this
Relatively.
is really cool. You could presumably.
Yeah, I picked up.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I picked up on that idea before, and yeah, I do try and like parent the thing to the workspace like at the last possible moment.
But it seems like ColdSmoke is saying something like next level after that, right? I mean, certainly you set the attributes and properties and so on, and then parent it to the workspace. But he's saying that if you take multiple parts and parent them to a model, and then parent the model to the workspace, it's even more efficient than just parenting the individual parts to the workspace. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you can actually see that I did that exact same trick. I'm opening up circular things. So I actually do that in this demo that I released for free for this talk with the Bezier curves. So I create the model here. I draw the triangles and parent them to the model. And then once all of that is done, then I set yeah. So boom. And it's just instant.
If you wanted to like update something about them like after you'd already inserted them, would it make any sense to like remove them, or like if would you remove them and then update the thing and then put them back, or is it like definitely just going to be much faster to just do the single update?
So if I was gonna update them, it actually it probably would be faster to set the parent of the model to nil and then set the properties of all those things, and then reparent the model to the workspace. I think that's actually a good point. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the thing, but I'm pretty sure most properties you can change about parts. And this might have been Roblox might have updated this because they tweak things like this all the time without like going like, "Hey guys, we changed the way that properties update the parts around that are connected to a part." But it's definitely at one point in time, even if you change the color of a part, it would like recalculate the collisions on all sides of the part.
Right.
So like yeah, even just changing the color of the pathway, you would have benefited by switching it out over the workspace, switching it back in. And also, kind of relevant to that question, is another thing that I just posted to Twitter. Yeah, this file, chunk system.
Can we just spend the next 6 hours touring through your backlog here?
I know. I told you. I was like, once I get going, I can just keep going forever.
Please.
I have all these different things that connect to each other. So this has a chunk system, kind of like the terrain that I was just showing off. Except for I've got like I think that this place has like 200 NPCs right now running around this base plate. But the NPCs are all running on the server where all the chunks are loaded. But on the local client side, I'm selectively moving the chunks in and out of the replicated storage. So while the chunk is in the replicated storage, I'm not getting any updates about the NPC. But as you are maybe seeing if you're watching, if an NPC walks into one of the chunks I have loaded, they automatically switch into my workspace and then begin being replicated again. I when I posted this to Twitter, I was like, I think most people probably don't understand at all like what the point of this is.
Oh, I
Wait,
understand,
is
I
this-
understand the point because we have some problem to which this could potentially be applied, but I don't understand how you did it. So
Yeah, so all the NPCs this is also is local side animation for the NPCs. So the animations stop if the characters are outside of the world. Also, actually, while I'm at it, I think the graphic settings are being weird.
Is the server keeping track of all the NPCs in the whole experience?
Yes.
Right.
So the server is just moving them around using humanoid, the function move of humanoid to like make them walk. But on the server side, they don't have animations. But yeah, the server's just moving them around. And then on the client side, and also the server basically it has this code that just tracks when these guys move around, and if they enter into a new chunk, which I do simply just by rounding the position down because that's like the fastest way to spatially group these positions. You know, I don't want to actually calculate like if the thing is within this or this. Like I'm just like take the x coordinate, round it, divide it by 48, round it down. Take the z coordinate, divide by 48, round down. Boom, that's a chunk it's in. So it converts that into a string, and then it just goes, here's the chunk, boom, and it moves the guy over. So it's like very low calculation.
wait. What does move the guy over mean? What is a chunk?
Okay, so each of these squares is the chunk, and the chunks in this instance, I believe these are. Let's look at the code. Let's dig in. So where do I modules chunk system? Okay, here we go. Chunk size is 128 studs. This can be anything. There's no reason I did that except that it's a power of 2. Chunk load radius is the radius that the client is loading around them. And so I have this tracked object class that I wrote. So basically, over in this script, when I create a dummy model, where do I do that? I do that here for I equal 1 comma 50 do. So I'm cloning each of these models. I give them an NPC tag that's for the animations to figure out what these models are, and then chunk system track object. So I just take that model, I track it. The tracker thing essentially gives it like attributes which are just useful for being able to reference information from other scripts. And then it adds it to a table of tracked objects, and then the server just kind of combs through. Where does the server do that? Server task.spawn. So every 0.1 seconds, it kind of goes through the tracked objects and calls this update chunk function. The update chunk function. Okay, yeah, and all the update chunk function does is it sets the current chunk to basically this. It's a vector 2 that is just the position rounded down by the chunk size for the x and the z, because I don't really care about the vertical space when I'm doing these chunks.
So
Continue.
is that how the client knows like when to make an NPC disappear?
So the client doesn't have to at all. The server is basically the server is shuffling the NPCs around between the chunk folders that are made. So I get chunk folder where it gets the chunk ID. Yeah, and it just makes a folder like out in the workspace.
Oh, and then the client moves them between workspace and replicated storage?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh
the
my
client just
God.
shuffles them back and forth, and that just basically enables and disables replication. And
I
it
hate
just
how good
works
that
very
is.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first thought of doing this, I was like, there's no way this will work. Like, there's got to be some sort of weird problems with it. But then I did it, and I was like, wow, it works surprisingly well. But there's a couple of tricks. Like, I did have to make sure when I am tracking these dummy models, I somewhere in here I had to make sure that the what do you call that? The physics service sets different clients to be owners of physics objects.
Oh, collision
Um,
groups?
no. Not
Oh,
collision.
oh, you're right. Network ownership.
Yeah, network ownership. And I had to make sure that all of these NPCs, that the network ownership was the server. If the server does not own the NPCs, then things act very weird, and they like NPCs freeze up when they try to cross between chunks. So like if you then walk over and load a chunk, there will just be like hundreds of these NPCs all right on the edge. And then once they're loaded in, then they start like teleporting around. Um, yeah, and it was very odd behavior. But once I made sure that it's like they're purely controlled on the server, things work brilliantly.
So I have a question about the client moves it to replicated storage, but doesn't then the server like still keep like sending the client data like in order to keep that folder and replicated storage in sync with the server?
That's a great question, and I assume so. I mean, because of the fact that like when the server switches the parent of the model to like one of the folders that's loaded, the fact that the NPC then is accurately moved from the folder and replicated storage into the folder and workspace, even though the server sees them all as being in the workspace. The fact that that works tells me that yeah, the server must just be still attempting to replicate everything. But I think the little bit of magic here is in the fact that on the client, the fact like parts existing in the workspace just like adds it's intense.
Right.
Kind of
So the
for
chunk system here is saving the client from rendering things that are far away from it, but like, say we had like memory concerns about the client, like sort of having to hold all of the like far away pieces of data, or like concerns about like updating that like too frequently or receiving too much data from the server, then in that case,
I think memory wise and network wise, I don't think that this is doing much for you. Yeah. But I think like rendering wise, and probably like CPU usage wise, I think that this is probably better. I would really be a good idea to actually just benchmark this.
could you just like instead of moving it to replicated, instead of the client moving it to replicated storage, the client, like, I don't know, somehow the server knows when the client like is too far away from this chunk. So then the server like I was gonna say moves that to server storage, but that doesn't really make sense. The server still needs
well, I mean, I think kind of the main thing which you're getting at there, kind of, I mean, I don't want to speak for you necessarily, but uh that kind of goes into the NPC design, right? So like if you were making a game like this, you probably want it so that the NPCs that are far away, like, just straight up, despawn. If there's no players within 300 studs of where these NPCs are supposed to be just like hanging out, the server can just get rid of it until the player, until there's any, some player nearby, right? But the way that I designed this, I actually designed this just because somebody asked me. They're like, "Hey, can you do this?" And I was like, "I don't know. Good question. I'll try." Uh, but I made this to be very like plug and play, so that regardless of, somebody can fully design their own NPC behavior, and all they have to do is connect it to the chunk system using chunk system track object, and then all of that other stuff that I wrote is just handled automatically, and you don't have to do any other manual work uh, for this client side rendering thing to be going on. So this is really kind of like a one size fits all approach that's like set it and forget it kind of. And then there's ways that you can optimize your NPC design on top of that to like really get good performance impacts out of it.
Okay, cool. What's Yi?
Well, I don't know. What is Yi? Oh, let's find out. Almost certainly. I like to use some people use like foo and bar. I use Yi and ha.
Oh my god, I do that too.
Yeah, I do that like even in my spreadsheets and stuff too. I'm like,
wait, use Yi and what?
Yi and ha. Yeehaw. So I'm from Texas, son. The NPC animate. Where's it's this module. This is where Yi is. There you go. Warren Yi.
Cool. Maybe that's a good place to stop, seeing as we're coming up on the next session. And I want to thank you a lot. This was really entertaining. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll come back and do this again 100 times.
I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me.